Okay.
All right, and you are now live.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting for the Environmental Commission, Tuesday, April 14th, I believe. We're going to go ahead and get started with roll call. Kristen Mollet. Laura Murphy.
Here.
Kira Abraham Pani. Chelsea Tu.
Present.
Mariana del Valle Prieto Cervantes.
Present.
Timothy Randazzo.
Present.
And Lacey, I'm here as chair. We have another member listed on the agenda, Becky Johnson. This would be a new member. I'm not sure if she's been sworn in yet or confirmed as another Environmental Commission member. But when or if that happens and she's able to join us, we'll make sure to introduce her to the group. At this time, if there's anyone from the public wishing to address the commission on any item not included in the agenda, you can do so now.
Members of the public wishing to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling in from a phone, press *9. Chair, there does not seem to be any members of the public wishing to speak at this time. Oh, I'm sorry, you have one.
Okay, great.
Diane Nielsen, you now have the floor for public comment.
Thank you. Hello, commissioners. I just wanted to say this is the first time I've ever noticed that Zoom has been available for Environmental Committee. And I am so happy for you and the hopefully other commissions that may be getting this also. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you so much, Diane. We appreciate that comment. And yes, we share your excitement in being able to have this platform now. It's really important to all of us to ensure that the public has a way to interact with the commission live and sort of in real time. So yes, thank you. Any other members of the public?
There are no other indications that members of the public wish to speak at this time.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go a little bit off the agenda. I'd like to review the notes, and if there's any comments on the notes from last meeting or a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes for the meeting on March 9th, 2021.
A second.
Yes, Beth, I see your hand raised. Is that a comment? I can't hear you if you're talking.
Lacey, I'm going to jump in and say that I have not reviewed the minutes from the last meeting. They were not included in the files for this meeting, and I did not go back to see if they had been posted on that date.
I wasn't able to find them either. And maybe that's what Beth is going to be commenting on. It looks like we lost her. She'll probably be rejoining in a moment.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
The minutes for the previous meeting were not included in the packet, and so a vote cannot be taken on that item this evening.
Thank you.
I don't think they were ready for approval.
Okay, all right. That would explain why it wasn't in the agenda either. So thank you for that clarification. Okay, we'll jump into business items. The first item of business is related to the Priority Impact Plastic Pollution Prevention Policy, also known as PIP4. I just wanted to touch base on this because we've had some evolution of the of the policy and wanted to bring some of these issues to the attention of the commission in case there was any interest in adjusting the policy at all. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen so I can walk through some of these.
Lacey, as you're
Um,
pulling that up, can I add two things? I had to connect and disconnect and reconnect again, so I apologize.
No problem.
Becky Johnson, that was added months ago onto the roll call of the civic clerk agenda, which is automatically generated. So Dominique,
Okay.
I'll probably have you take a look at that to get rid of that, because I don't think we have a new member. And then the other item, which I think you guys successfully resolved on your own, is that I did not attach the minutes from the last meeting. They'll be on there next time along with tonight's.
Okay. Thank
Thanks.
you. Thanks for that clarification, Beth. Yes. And Dominique, thanks for helping us with the notes or the minutes. So jumping back into the plastics policy, Mariana did a great job finalizing the posters, and we are getting quotes right now to have these printed. So I'll share what the final versions were. I think it's great. We have both English and Spanish on the front of these posters rather than doing sort of a front and back piece. So this would be what is behind the line, so to speak, in the prep area. So when people are packaging everything and putting things into the to-go bags, this would be posted there. We'll probably laminate these. And then these are the signs that would be placed at the front door or at the point of sale to inform customers that they would have to request these items and that they wouldn't automatically be given. Again, in English and Spanish on the front, which is great.
Lacey,
And the-
apologies to interrupt you, but I don't believe that we are seeing what you and me
You're
and to
seeing?
see.
Okay, let me see. No, thanks for telling me that. Here we go. Okay, now can you see them?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for telling me. So these are the ones that would be at the point of sale. And then these are the ones that would be behind the line. They're in the prep area.
I think you have that backwards, Lacey.
Do I? Oh,
Right now, we're seeing the front of line. I mean,
Okay.
the back of in the kitchen, and then that's what we're seeing now.
Okay. I might be like, technology might be slower than my voice, so sorry. Hopefully you're looking at the one with the big circle on it right now. So these are finalized. Beth is working on having them printed. One thing that we'll need from the committee is support in distributing these. So once we have them, we're gonna ask commission members to help in the distribution of different businesses. And when we did this before for distributing information about the policy and encouraging people to come to some of the sessions that we had, the kind of lunch and learn sessions, we basically picked, I think, different parts of the city and sort of canvassed different areas. And if anybody had particular relationships or anything existing with businesses, obviously you can focus that on places that you frequent or that you're a regular customer. I think that's really beneficial if they're getting it from a face that they're familiar with. Timothy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a point of clarification. Was PIP 4 passed, or is this just something separate that we're doing before PIP4?
It's something that would support PIP4, but it's not, the policy hasn't passed.
Got it. So it's
But
not
these
part,
are-
it's not a part of PIP4.
Yeah, we wanted to get started on something sooner and wanted to sort of have this voluntary experience for businesses to, become familiar with the idea of having customers request these items. And so these were developed, they were actually started being developed last fall. And then as these things go, it just took a while to get them finalized in a way that we were happy with.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? So as soon as we get the posters, or maybe even before we get them, I'll probably send out like a sign-up sheet similar to last time, and folks can just sign up. I'm sorry. My family just put on Alexa music. I'm going to step away for just a moment and remind them that I'm on a meeting and to keep the noise down. So please just hold on. Okay, I'm back. I'm sure you would have really enjoyed the music they were jamming out to, but we'll keep it mellow. So on the regarding back to the policy itself, I did receive a couple of comments and just things for us to consider. One is Mylar balloons and sort of an interest in maybe focusing specifically on additional outreach regarding Mylar balloons. A representative from PG&E reached out and said, they're really interested in trying to take some action on this because they are leading to fires and power outages. So when they heard about our policy through the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, they reached out. And we haven't had a chance to connect in person, but I just wanted to share that that's something that has come up regarding this policy. And then the City Council also received a presentation a couple months ago on AB 1383. And there was information within that presentation on the fact that jurisdictions will have to update their regulations to support the collection of compost. And so I've reached out to the representative that gave that presentation to council because I'd like to connect with them and try to ensure that whatever they would need to require for 1383 is also included or addressed, if possible, within the PIP4 policy or the litter ordinance that's sort of connected with the plastics policy. So that's another piece that I just haven't heard back from that rep yet, but if we do, and if it leads to any changes in the policy, you'll all be consulted and brought into that process. Mariana, I didn't know, did you want to talk at all about what Washington did? Okay.
Yeah, so Washington just introduced a bill that passed the House. It's a plastics and recycling bill. And one of the things that it has on there, we've been using a lot of the language of available upon request when it comes to some of the utensils and to-go-ware for restaurants. But they actually made, instead of upon request, they made upon customer affirmation. The logic being, if somebody's, if they're ordering from DoorDash, for example, there's not a direct way that they can request. Instead, they will need a way for there to be a button that the customer clicks instead. So that's why they added it to upon customer affirmation to include that that button on applications that do, home deliveries of to-go food. DoorDash did have a little bit of was pushing back and was trying to get exempted from the bill. So that is also kind of giving us a little bit more intel on how DoorDash feels about these types of bills and ordinances. So I kind of just wanted to bring it up to see if we wanted to adopt that language.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Thank you for that background in the customer affirmation language that is in the Washington bill. I was wondering if it's possible to keep both upon request and just add an or to and then add the clause customer affirmation. So I can see that as, especially as we're going back to eating at the restaurants, that it would be a little bit easier for the restaurant operators and owners to not provide utensils unless people affirmatively requested them. But then, of course, in the instance of online orders, which I'm sure will continue, it does make sense to add the language for people to provide the option of customer affirmation for those instances. But I don't think we need to specify it in the ordinance. If we just keep it at upon request or customer affirmation, I think that's good enough.
So adding instead of replacing, is what you're suggesting, Chelsea? Okay.
Right, like an either or option.
Okay.
I think
Timothy.
suggestion is a good one. I agree.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna implement, so if everybody knows where their raise the hand feature is, I'm gonna ask us to use that. Just it helps me keep track of speaking order. Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a more inclusive term to use, customer affirmation. I agree with Chelsea that I think we should probably add it instead of substitute. I would also recommend maybe adding a clause talking about what customer affirmation means then, just to explain, the background of it and say that it's for, delivery services to include that option for users. So I would just recommend that we add more information about what it means, just because I've never heard of that phrase before.
Kira? Oh, you're muted.
So I am. I agree with all the points being made. I really appreciate, Mariana, that you have flagged this based on the case in, was it Washington? So it makes sense to me that we can sort of cover all bases by having affirmation or request and sort of leave it up to the businesses and in some cases the delivery companies to figure out what that means. But, I'm a little bit, I don't know. I think we might think about whether we define what it means, to Timothy's point. On the one hand, that might help clarify. On the other hand, we might be being more prescriptive than we need to be in the code. Request or affirmation. I mean, I guess I'd be curious what needs defining, like whether that's verbal or in an order. I don't want to go beyond our purview by telling people how to request or affirm that. Maybe it's a definition we add. Request or affirm means.
Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I initially meant it as adding it into the definition section of the policy and not necessarily part of like the clause of it.
I just had a clarifying question that I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So the upon affirmation was primarily used to encompass the need or the recognized need that delivery services would need some sort of button or piece to include. Okay. So I'm just recalling our last meeting when we had talked about like DoorDash and these food delivery things. And the approach then was to sort of not include anything deliberately about that. I know this isn't like as directly speaking to that, even though it seems to be roundabout getting at that point. Because I think of the point that Kira is kind of making about like, well, that's very prescriptive, and the approach that we had discussed taking at the last meeting was more one of working with DoorDash and those other partners during the implementation and outreach, rather than putting something in the policy about that. So I think what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, maybe we are welcome to shift that again. That's totally fine in response to the information that we've learned from sort of precedent that Mariana has researched. Go ahead, Timothy.
From my understanding from the first time around, we were talking more about the surcharges from their apps. And I feel like that is more prescriptive of telling, you know, DoorDash or Uber Eats on how to run their business or how they need to change their business. Or like it's more technical about the app itself. But I feel that adding just this clause about customer affirmation just kind of shows that they are also responsible for providing, you know, plastic and plastics that are polluting our communities. So I feel that if we just make it in a way that highlights that they're also responsible without penalizing them with the surcharges, then I feel that it's kind of different, if that makes sense.
Maybe. I don't remember anything about surcharges at the last meeting. There was a draft. I think there was just a piece in that language. I think we had addressed surcharges as like, that's something that council, we can recommend council do on their own as sort of a separate act. And maybe that's something we put in the staff report. So there was that. And I think that might be what you're referring to with the surcharges, but there was also a piece.
Yeah, I could have been
There was
remembered.
also a piece in the policy.
Yeah, I thought the language was relating to the surcharges. I could be wrong.
Okay, I'd have to go back and look, but I think it was more about like recognizing them as a link. Well, we have a couple of routes of action. If there's a motion that anybody wants to make to revise the policy, we can motion to do that. I'm happy to entertain any motions. We can go back as a subcommittee and review the policy and look at the proposed changes. If we do that, we'll have to bring it back to the full committee for review and approval again. And we don't have to do any of those right now. We can wait until we sort of talk through some other elements of the policy. If that would be helpful, because the timeline and when council hears this might have an impact on if we have time to, you know, do another round of revisions.
I will move that we revise the code. Sorry, I don't have the exact section in front of me. So I'm working off memory, but I think it was to change on customer request to on customer request or affirmation.
Can you guys see my screen? I have the policy up.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just scrolling. So this would be the section that we would be changing.
Okay, so unless requested or affirmed by the customer.
I'm just gonna put that in parentheses.
I second that motion.
I just want to be clear, Kira, this is your only motion, or are there other areas that you want to incorporate, like the definitions?
I hope I'm not being premature. I am fine with just saying that, but I'm also fine to add a definition if others feel that it's necessary.
Well, why don't we, since this motion has been moved and seconded, we'll vote on this motion. And then if anybody has any other motions regarding other aspects of the policy, we can move forward with those. So I'm going to do a roll call vote. And I need to stop sharing my screen so that I can look at all your faces as I do this. Okay. So the motion is to add the language as proposed in the section 860.14a. And I'm going to go through all of you, including the people that made the motions. Timothy Randazzo.
Aye.
Laura Murphy.
Aye.
Chelsea Tu.
Aye.
Mariana del Valle Prieto Cervantes.
Aye.
And Kira Abraham Pani.
Aye.
I also vote aye, and the motion passes. Any other motions regarding this item?
I move to add a, is it like a policy recommendation in the first section about Mylar balloons to restrict the, restrict the distribution of Mylar balloons.
Is there any discussion that people would like to have, or is there a second? Is this the section that you're referring to?
Yeah.
So balloons are mentioned in G, H, and I.
Yeah, so maybe were you looking to, I guess my question, are you looking to specify the types of balloons like Mylar balloons or add that into it?
I'm not specifying anything. If you have a motion, I'll entertain it. I was just providing an update on conversations or comments that have come up from community members. So I wasn't advocating one way or the other.
Okay, let me just read these again. You can probably entertain Laura Murphy. She has her hand up. I'll read this again.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
So it seemed to me from what you were mentioning in the beginning, Lacey, that PG&E had reached out and was interested in maybe helping or coordinating promotion of consumer awareness about Mylar balloons, along with our efforts. That was more or less what I heard from what you had shared. And I don't think that necessarily translates to needing to specify Mylar balloons as opposed to any and all plastic or poly-based balloon products. I think that simply calling out balloons in the policy makes sense. But as far as outreach and education that we might be able to leverage other community partner interest in doing outreach, which may or may not call out specific types of balloons, such as Mylar.
Yeah. Yes, your understanding of my description is accurate. And I just want to reconfirm, I haven't had a physical one-on-one conversation. This has all been over email. So I don't feel confident really articulating exactly what's being expressed. I just wanted to share with this committee that it has come to my attention.
I apologize. I rescind my motion then.
Okay. The other piece that I wanted to discuss was, or before discussing timeline and approval process, is outreach and implementation. So again, I just want to reiterate that I think it's going to be really important for us to dedicate some funds to supporting the implementation of this policy. Otherwise, it's just a policy that sits on a shelf and gets dusty and isn't really implemented. And obviously, we all want it to be implemented and effective. And so I think there are suggestions of approaches, and I'll save some of this for the budget discussion, but I just want the committee to know that I think in regards to this policy, we should consider supporting funds to support the implementation. And that would include things like a resource guide, both virtual outreach, technical assistance, partner agency coordination, because we've all done a really good job on this policy, but I just don't think we have the capacity to implement it to the level that it would need to be implemented. And then timeline for approval, Beth, I'm going to turn to you for this piece, just to talk a little bit about what the process might be for putting this on the council agenda.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So the process is typically there's a management meeting held the week before the public notice goes out for council meetings. Right now they're holding 2 meetings a month and also doing special meetings, but more so to discuss their objectives that they came up with at essentially their annual work plan type of meeting. So the goal would be to look at the council calendar. We do have a lot of other amendments that are moving forward, likely prior to this, just because of the council priorities that have been set out. As you all recall, when we did the study session, this wasn't something that we were told to look at, but the EC was created by council, and we do have our objectives of the committee there. So I do appreciate the initiative and amount of work that's gone into creating this. If I try to put it on the next council agenda meeting, I have no idea what's discussed in those management meetings. So it could be that it could move forward. It could be that it does not. There's still some work that I need to kind of clean up and make sure that what I'm preparing for the packet moves forward. That includes reviewing some recent suggestions that were made to the draft staff report that I had started, as well as just putting together all the attachments that will be considered as part of that application. I would say we should have it before council within the next 2 months for a first reading. All amendments require 2 readings, so those will be book back-to-back in consecutive council meetings, kind of depending on what does happen at the first one though. Second reading happens, and then 30 days after that, the code becomes effective, unless we specified something else in the code, which I think was a discussion we were having a little bit earlier on. But hopefully that provides you with a good enough synopsis of what that process is typically like and how they make their decisions.
Thank you, Beth. So I just wanted to sort of timeline this out. So if this takes 2 months to be heard for the first read, that would put us into, let's just say for the sake of argument, the second meeting in June. So end of June, council's first and third meeting Thursdays, right?
Correct.
So that would be June 17th for the first read. And then the second read would be
For first
July.
and third, I mean, it could be the 3rd and the 17th. It could be the 17th and then the 1st of July. And that would throw us to August 1st for implementation, effectiveness date.
Okay, so August 1st, let's say that it's the 17th and then July 1st. And then August 1st for implementation. That would give us still August, September, October, November, December. It's 5 months for businesses to get acquainted with it.
Because are we specifying a different effective date in the ordinance itself, right?
January 1st, 2022.
Right.
So the more that my main concern is the more we push it back, the sort of less time we have to help businesses with the transition. So 5 months is probably still okay, but hopefully it doesn't get pushed back anymore. So if there's anything that we can do or I can do as chair to help.
I would doubt that it would get pushed back more. It would be my hope that I would have it on earlier than the projection you just ran. But then again, what does hope get you sometimes?
Okay, so let's just say worst case scenario, it would, go through the process and be effective August 1st. That would give us 5 months. Okay.
And I think we will be discussing the potential of having assistance with outreach and what that might look like. So timelines are going to be helpful in figuring all of this out. But yeah, definitely the earlier the better. I'll do what I can to push it forward.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, let's see, where are we? That was everything I had for this first business item. Any other comments from the council? I think I'll open it up for public comment too, since we've been discussing a lot in this section. Dominique, is there anyone there for public comment?
There are no hands raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to the next business item, which is the budget request proposal. So we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. I'm not sure what the city's timeline is for all of these items, but I wanted to give our commission an opportunity to do a little bit of initial brainstorming, I guess, around budget considerations and requests. Obviously, we've talked about the PIP4 implementation and communication. And so I think we might want to think about budget requests in terms of like project requests, something like the plastics policy, climate action planning, which we've talked about before, those being sort of separate and unique projects that might have a different funding request process versus our base budget requests. And Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, but historically, the commission has received about $2,500 as a base budget. Last year, we received $500. And I think if we want, we can request, an amount somewhere within that range for the next fiscal year. But I wanted to talk about the budget as a commission, both in terms of specific project requests we might have, as well as base budget requests and what we might be considering using the base budget request, recognizing that having a base budget also allows us to be responsive to things that might come up through the year. So we don't necessarily have to have our base budget request detailed out, item by item, but we should have a general sort of idea of that amount that we'd be requesting. So I listed 2 projects, the PIP4 and the climate. Are there any other projects that people would want to put forward for the commission to consider? Yeah, Chelsea.
Yes, I have 2 projects that I want to kind of initially share out and see if they would belong in the EC's budget or as part of the EC's budget. And then also just to use this opportunity to preview one of the new ideas, which is new, that we can explain, Timothy and I can explain as part of the Green Recovery Subcommittee later in item 5 for a report from Commissioner. So apologies in advance if you're hearing some of this stuff for the first time and there's no context. Hopefully we can provide more of that in the upcoming item. So the first one is something that the Green Economic Recovery Committee has been working on for a while. It's essentially a guide or a poster on how small businesses can get information and costs information, in particular on recycling and composting in the city of Seaside, as well as how to get financing for any kinds of upgrades for their businesses like HVAC or lights. And so that has been underway for a few months now. So we're getting ready to wrap up that poster, which can be turned into a website or it can be uploaded as a link to the city's website to be downloaded by different businesses that are interested. So those are some of the ways that we're thinking about presenting that information. Since there is no, as I understand, currently there's no website or like easily accessible flyer that consolidates all of that information I just mentioned in one single place. So my question related to budget is whether making a web page out of the city's website as one of the city's web pages would be an IT item, part of the city's operations, or would we also need to budget specific item under the EC's budget for this endeavor for turning the poster into a website?
I don't think that would need to be a line item for the EC. That would just be whether or not there were capacity in-house to do it.
Okay, great. Then there might not be a budget request for that.
Beth, if there's not capacity in-house to do it, would it be a budget request?
I'm not sure. Dominique, do you have any experience in dealing with that?
Not directly. So that would definitely be something we probably want to revisit coming back to bring back a follow-up.
It is my understanding, though, that most of what the city has up on the website is maintained in-house, and sometimes it's individual department responsibility. At one point, I do believe there was somebody more in charge of doing it, as well as, updating social media. I don't think that's been happening as much this past year, but I'll ask around and I'll get back to you in email, but I'm pretty certain I was correct in my first educated guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Chelsea, just a quick question. Did you and/or Timothy consider or look at existing platforms like the Green Business Network to see if what they have, like if we could just link to the Green Business Network, or I don't know what
I-
that's the only one I know of, but
Yeah, I don't think I've looked at Green Business Network specifically. I've looked at several websites, like PG&E's websites, AMBAC's website, and just kind of try to consolidate different information. But I
Mhm.
will do that and see if I can mine any more information to add to this poster. And if anybody has additional resources, please feel free to share.
great, yeah. Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, something separate to this, but there's a potential funding request that would be coming from the Green Economic Recovery Subcommittee regarding a project that we're developing. We'll provide more context later in agenda item 5, but it's basically for a farmers market kind of community fair. So I feel like this would probably be something that we should allocate a budget for. As of amount, that is something that the Green Economic Recovery Subcommittee is still looking into.
Thanks, Timothy. Chelsea, if you need any additional information on the California Green Business Network, let me know. They did a presentation for us, but I think it might have been before you joined the commission. But they had a lot of resources that might be valuable in addition to what you found for AMBAG and
Great.
PG&E.
Great,
Yeah.
I will reach out to you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Laura. Go ahead.
So for budget request items, I would say for the Habitat Subcommittee, there are some small miscellaneous expenses, but a lot of materials are being provided in kind from the city, and also budget needs have been covered primarily by our community partners that are also participating in habitat maintenance. I think that big picture long term, the type of budget needs for further expansion of habitat projects will be beyond the scope of what we could reasonably anticipate achieving as a commission within our annual budget. So that is not progressing aside from grant application coordination. So while it would be nice to have even some miscellaneous funds to provide some kind of a match to support the input, financial input from our community partners, I would say that that wouldn't need to be more than something like $250.
So you think that, are you saying that would be part of like the base budget rather than a separate like project budget request? Am I understanding that right?
I think that that could come from base budget, yes, because it doesn't need to be a significant amount of funding, and it's not, it's for miscellaneous supply needs as they arise, not for a planned out budgeted project.
Okay.
An idea on that is once we see what we are allocated, we could have a meeting. If there are even very specific requests at that time, or even just more generic based on our past year of experience in doing these collaborations where we do just want to earmark it. That way we don't need to have a meeting and hold a vote every time something pops up. If we know right off the bat, we want to put it towards certain projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be something too, Chelsea, for your website or flyers about information. You know, if we do find for whatever reason that we do need to spend some money to either add the content to the website or develop the flyers that in print, that would be something we could allocate within the base budget rather than a separate sort of project budget.
Okay. That sounds good. Any other thoughts around budget? Okay.
Any public requests on this item? Or public comment, sorry. Probably not. All right, so with all of the comments that the commissioners made, I've been making notes, and I'll probably just chat with Beth one-on-one about these and put something together for the commission to then review. But it seems pretty straightforward. All right. Kira, I think the next item C was your update, right, on SB1? I believe this was the adaptation planning information.
Okay, thank you. I thought I was sharing that. I know I shared it by email, but I did not realize it was added to the agenda. So if you can give me just a moment to pull up the information so I have it in front of me, I'll be happy to summarize it.
Sure.
I just would like to make sure I have everything right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just sharing out for the commission's awareness as well as for city staff awareness, simply reporting out what I saw in an article from the San Diego Union Tribune. According to that piece, then SB 1, Senate Bill 1, would allocate up to $100 million a year for local governments to conduct sea level rise adaptation planning. The bill, which I believe has been introduced but not yet passed or signed into law, so this is, I believe, still speculative. If it passed, then it would also require a bond measure to be passed in 2022. So again, this is just forward-looking and still rather conditional. But if that funding is passed and SB 1 is passed, then grants could be provided by the Ocean Protection Council for cities to make adaptations to mitigate for or prepare for sea level rise. Now, the reason we would want to pay attention to this now is because the way this legislation is written, as I understand it, priority in funding would go to cities that have already begun the work. And this kind of analysis and planning does take quite a bit of time. So this is why I forwarded it to Beth, and I think it's great for the commission and even more importantly, the city staff to be aware of this. We may, let me see here. I'm kind of reading as I speak. Sorry, I'm not more prepared. Yeah, priority goes to cities that have already started local climate adaptation planning, especially sea level rise. We've been talking with the county about their local climate adaptation planning. We've also been aware of the city of Monterey doing some sea level rise planning and analysis in regards to their options in maybe moving around Del Monte Avenue and the waterfront to either retreat or armor the coast in anticipation of sea level rise. So I just want to make sure that Seaside is both aware of what's on the horizon with sea level rise itself. I do think it's really important for our city to be doing this kind of analysis and looking at the infrastructure that could be under threat, maybe planning different adaptation scenarios. And in the next couple of years, we might have significant state funding available for us if we have done that groundwork. And I just don't want Seaside to be left behind. I'm also flagging this because if our neighboring cities, for example, were to choose to armor their coasts, there could be a direct negative impact on Seaside because erosion tends to be, sea level rise and erosion tend to hit harder next to areas that have armored. So that's yet another reason that I feel Seaside should be keeping pace with our neighbors in doing these analyses. All of that is to say, I'm not sure, maybe we can have a short discussion about what the commission thinks and whether we might want to make a formal recommendation to the city council. I don't know if we're allowed to, I don't think we can make recommendations to staff, but you know, what would be our options moving forward as a commission in urging that kind of analysis if the commission agrees that we should?
I'll open it up for discussion, but just to answer your question, since it might be helpful for the discussion, is I think our best course of action for communicating would be to draft a memo that we can send to city council. That's sort of the traditional route. We could also talk with our council liaison about how to elevate this topic or conversation amongst council members. Yes, Chelsea.
I really appreciate your bringing this bill proposal to us, Kira. I was just actually reading it and pulling up online, and it looks really promising. It's passed a couple of committees already, so that's good to know. And it looks like the $100 million that you mentioned for adaptation would go towards planning and implementation. And I was thinking, you know, in connection with climate action planning for the county, that this might be a potential resource if the bill is passed into law to implement any kind of adaptation policies that climate action plan, you know, shapes up. So it looks like, yeah, so it could be that we work with other local governments within the county that, you know, have coastal and ocean access, and obviously, you know, facing similar issues due to sea level rise and other climate impacts, to work together to get this money in connection with how the climate action plan directs policies and, you know, addresses sea level rise.
Any other comments?
If no one else is jumping in, I just
There
wanted
is,
to.
actually.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, I
No,
didn't
go
see
ahead.
Timothy's hand.
Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, just thank you for bringing this up. It does seem really promising, and I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that Seaside should be taking the actions to also do what our neighbors are doing, because there could be very serious adverse effects if we don't. So I just want to echo that, and thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, if you were going to move to make a motion, I'll second it.
I'm going to add something into the discussion. Oh, go ahead, Kira. Sorry. Oh, you're muted. Okay. Okay. I think I'm understanding the sign language correct. I'm going to be somewhat of a cynic, I guess, which I try not to be usually, but my concern is, and it's, yes, I think we absolutely should be thinking about this and addressing this. My concern is that I know the limitations of staff time, and this would, even if we sent a memo to council and they're like, yeah, let's do this, it would still fall on the shoulders of staff. And if we're thinking, like, we haven't even done a climate action plan, right? And that's sort of like a first step. And so I think we should be really aware of what we want to prioritize before we share or we go forth too much to council, just because of that workload impact. And you know, it's kind of like, if everything's important, then nothing's important, that can sometimes happen. So I don't know, I just wanted to sort of add that element of constraints. Kira, I think you had your hand up first, and then Timothy.
Yeah, Lacey, I think I share your concern that, our staff, my understanding is that they are strapped for time and resources, and this is no small kind of project. And I think if my shallow understanding of the bill is accurate, and it may not be, there's a little bit of a catch-22 written into it, because it seems to be saying funding goes to the cities that have already put some funding into this effort, right? And my concern here is that the more resourced coastal communities, the wealthier coastal communities, may have the resources to do this kind of planning and thus have priority for additional state funding. And if those communities do choose something like armoring, it comes directly at the expense of communities like ours that maybe didn't have the resources to do these studies. And so I might be missing something there, but it seems to sort of be a regressive model to fund the cities that have already done the planning. So I think that's one reason that Chelsea's idea really resonates with me, because I think working together as a peninsula, specifically along the coastline, and I do think Marina, is included in that, we could move as a region instead of working against each other as cities. We are all connected as a region economically, and that further down the line, if it does come down to funding, is sort of a stronger proposal, a stronger application anyway, to show that our communities with really diverse and disproportionate resources have come together to work on it. So I like the idea of working with the county on their climate adaptation plan. And maybe we propose that we form some sort of joint effort with coastal cities in the county to specifically address sea level rise and come up with adaptation plans together. Still takes tap time, but maybe it doesn't fall just on Seaside staff. And maybe there's some resources available to fund it, in a shared agreement.
Mm-hmm. Timothy, I saw your hand and then Chelsea's hand.
Yeah, I think that's just a really great point, what Kira was saying. And Chelsea, that I think it would be stronger if we work as a region. My original question was more about, I wonder if the climate action plan, if we put funding for a climate action plan, if that could constitute as us doing analysis for our community in regards to that, because I know the climate action plan is very inclusive and we can target different things within it. So I guess my question was if that can also maybe fall in line with this bill's requests or requirements. But that would we'd probably have to do a little bit more digging.
Yeah, Chelsea and then Mariana.
I was wondering that, Kara, you're talking about the provision, it's in the bill talking about priority shall be given to those local governments that have agreed most effectively and urgently to plan for and implement actions to address sea level rise. Okay, yeah. It might just be the lawyer in me, but that sentence just doesn't seem very clear. And since it's in an earlier kind of form, I think that the equity issue that you raised is really important. It's often raised on these really big bonds proposals. So I've seen like in Prop 68 for Parks and Rec, that equity was intentionally built in to set aside prioritize funding for lower income communities or disadvantaged communities. And I don't know if that's part of this bill, but at the very least, it does seem like the sentence I was just reading might need some clarification, and equity, if it's not already embedded in the bill, could probably be. And I don't necessarily have a proposal as to what action the committee could take. One option is to raise those concerns with the bill authors with a simple letter. If that's something that the committee wants to do, I think that that's probably like equity issues and like access to resources, probably something that's not unique to Seaside. So it might be raised sooner or later from others as well. So I think it's just up to the appetite of the committee and staff, see if we want to make sure that that language is clarified and that the lower income communities that have less resources can access that money if the bill is actually passed.
Mariana?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with, Kira's train of thought. I definitely think we need to be doing something. I don't have a recommendation of what that is, but this is definitely an equity issue and something that's been on my mind since I saw the Monterey plan and how that, those decisions may affect and negatively affect communities like Seaside. So I definitely believe that, we should definitely take some form of action. And I like Timothy's idea when it comes to maybe implement it into our climate actions.
Go ahead, Kira.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm hearing 3 potential actions. One is recommend that, I can't remember quite where we left it with the county on the climate adaptation plan, but it sounded like there was a lot of interest in trying to integrate with and or piggyback on what the county is doing. I sort of felt like the county was discouraging it, but we were leaning into it. So we could follow up on that and look at our options. B, as Chelsea suggested, we could consider just as a commission or as a city reaching out to the bill authors and just raising that issue. Maybe it's already been considered, maybe other cities have brought it up. The third idea on the table, I think, is for Seaside to engage with our neighbors, at least, Marina and Monterey, at least on the specific question of sea level rise. We know that Monterey is actively analyzing its options. I don't know where Marina is with it. I don't know where the others peninsula cities are, although I know that Pacific Grove took some hard looks at sea level rise and coastal erosion in their local coastal plan, which they have. I think we could do that without waiting for the county to do the climate adaptation plan, which could take years, and without waiting for the bill. I just think, engaging with Monterey and perhaps Marina to explore a regional approach to sea level rise planning might be something we can do sooner than later. Just engaging in the conversation.
I have just sort of a point of clarification. So when we're talking about the county's work, I'm familiar with the climate action plan that they've been developing, which is different from an adaptation plan. Are they working on an adaptation plan as well?
I'm sorry, I was referring to the climate action plan. I might have conflated the two.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing it. Okay, because I missed plenty of things. I might have missed that.
And the difference, Lacey, is that climate action plan is like proactively planning for what is to come. Sorry, go ahead.
A climate action plan looks at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And sometimes it's a CEQA approved climate action plan, which sort of gets into how future development can support or mitigate their emissions through using the climate action plan, or it may not be CEQA approved. That's sort of a determination that the jurisdiction would have to make. Whereas a climate adaptation plan is saying, look, this is happening and this is how we're going to respond to protect our community. So one is more, proactive and one is more reactive.
Thank you. If that helps. I was conflating them. I can see the difference.
And the other thing to keep in mind, and I think this is important because in my experience, climate action plans don't always include adaptation measures. They're usually addressed separately. A sustainability plan is generally much more broad in terms of its scope. So that could potentially be something that an adaptation element is introduced in, because they're starting to include more and more aspects of resiliency. And that's sort of where that adaptation and resiliency sort of can sometimes get, language can be used interchangeably, I guess, sometimes with that in sustainability plans. But so that those are sort of the three considerations of types of plans. So does anybody want to draft? I mean, anybody is welcome, I think, to act on the suggestions that are put forth. If anyone is interested in drafting a letter to send to the authors of the bill, I think we can do that and then review it. Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we could also reach out to neighboring, draft a letter to send to similar environmental commissions or our counterparts at other jurisdictions if they exist, or maybe it's just to planning staff or to council on behalf of ourselves. If we wanted council to approve that before we sent it, we could, but I don't think that's necessarily required. But Beth, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It wouldn't be necessary to communicate across commissions like that with different cities. Although I want to think about the effectiveness of what you're proposing. And it could be that we do send a memo to our city council just regarding this topic in general and encouraging them to even share what communications they've had on this so far, if any, with other jurisdictions. Also encouraging public comment at those meetings. And that could be a coordinated effort where it's not just one 3-minute comment, but it's successive 3-minute comments on a similar subject.
Right.
It's not always clear what happens to memos after they're received.
Right. Laura, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry, I might have missed
I
it.
did, and then Beth was starting to address the comment that
Okay.
it was essentially to clarify as far as Kara's suggestion for engaging with other cities, with our neighboring cities, whether we would want that to try to be something done by the Environmental Commission or something that we would try to ask council to direct staff to engage with other city staff to have a discussion more at that level. And so I appreciated Beth's suggestion. And I think that would make more sense to me. We want to encourage this conversation to be happening among the city officials and city staff where the work will ultimately need to happen. So if that starts with a memo and then is followed up by reinforcement from all of us through public comment and or otherwise contacting our council members, I think that would be a good approach.
Does anyone want to volunteer to take a next step or to keep this moving?
I guess I wonder, is a memo necessary, or if it's possible for us to kind of do this idea scoping and sharing with council through comments?
I also think we have a first step to potentially with Councilmember Campbell, who is our council liaison. So we could get guidance even on the approach from him.
Go ahead, yeah, Kira.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think a conversation with council member Campbell is a good idea. And I can't remember, do we have a climate subcommittee?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, maybe it's a conversation with Campbell then. I agree with Chelsea that a memo feels like we're jumping straight to a formal recommendation before we've done sort of the scoping and info gathering that we need to do. Like I personally don't know what efforts might be happening in Marina or where the Monterey effort stands or who on staff might be coordinating with somebody on these issues. So that's the first step to find out what's already happening before we can really figure out our value add as a commission. That said, yeah, I do just feel a certain level of mild urgency in the impending doom way that climate change makes me always feel, it's urgent. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but it really has to happen. If Seaside is not looking at this, I think, Beth, you had suggested that nobody is looking at this in the city, then there is sort of a long-term concern that I have that Seaside could find ourselves in a really disadvantageous situation as time goes on. So all of that is to say, sure, let's talk to Campbell and Beth. I don't know if you can gather up any other info, like do we have any staff resources that can at least give us a sense of the state of play right now?
The only resource that I remember having that might have done everything from south of here to north of here is AMBAG had some projection maps done, and that would be helpful to see, and that could probably scare us a bit into being more active. So I'll reach out to AMBAG. I think it was Anne-Marie who also gave us a presentation on climate action plan, who had a meeting on that a couple of years ago now. So there were all cities represented at that meeting, and only some, it looks like, have taken serious action.
Kira, did you want to reach out to Jason?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.
Mariana, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help with the efforts. So Kira, if you want to include me, I'd be happy to. I'm not the best writer, so there's that.
That's okay. I would just ask him for some time on the phone. So I'd love to have you in that conversation, Mariana. I think Council Member Arrazola might have also been involved in some climate efforts. I don't know much about that, but if it's appropriate to talk to him as well.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Any public comment on this item before we move to the next?
There are not any requests for public comment at this time.
Thanks. The next item, Beth, I believe is yours, the overview of the Sustainable Central Coast Climate Summit.
Yeah, Dana Morrison actually attended this meeting, so she has a presentation for you on that. So I'm going to hand it over to Dana, my colleague. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, Dana.
Good evening, committee members. I believe this is my official time being introduced to you. Can everyone hear me first before I continue blabbing? Wonderful.
Yeah.
See nods.
We can. You're good.
So I am Beth's coworker, the other associate planner for the city of Seaside, and I was able to attend the Central Coast Climate Summit series, which occurred 2 weeks ago. So we had various presenters from cities. Some of what they discussed will actually touch on the discussion you guys just had. We do have some cities who are moving forward with climate action plans, and they also gave a good number of resources for getting information on tools regarding climate change and sea level rise, emissions, GHG, and how to get a climate action plan moving forward. So here are some of the cities that came. We had Gonzales, San Luis Obispo, Monterey County, AMBAG. The goal of the summit was to help establish just and equitable solutions to the challenges of global climate emergency by engaging and supporting local community leaders to develop implementable, actionable plans. So their major topics were climate action plans, creation, adoption, and implementation, and then a summary of what other jurisdictions are doing, climate action trailblazers. And then we had a breakout room discussions where the key part of our discussion was actually discussing having a regional climate action plan to hopefully take the burden off of smaller cities like Seaside. So just a quick highlight on some of the cities. San Luis Obispo, they do have a climate action plan in process. The climate action for recovery, community recovery, was approved by their council in August of last year. They do aim to be carbon neutral by 2035. And they are adopting a resilient SLO, which is a planning initiative to help the city of San Luis Obispo prepare for the climate impacts and the changes that will come as a result of this. And they're going to be updating their city general plan safety element to include adaptation strategies, education, implementation, community input, and vulnerability assessments. Santa Cruz is also working on a climate action plan. And so it's working this year and then proposed to be hopefully implemented by March of next year. So they're also doing an interim recovery plan at the moment before that's adopted, bringing in muni-skilled labor workforce development, green economy workforce development, green and quality of life infrastructure as well. The County of Monterey, which you guys did mention, they are developing a sustainability program and climate action plan. So it might have been where that kind of crossover, because it isn't just a climate action plan, it's also a sustainability program. It is in progress. The climate change integrated into their local hazard mitigation plan in summer of this year is what they're due to do. And then CAP is hopefully going to be drafted by winter of this year and aim to be published in fall of next year. And they are conducting a countywide emissions profile. So for the whole county, so interesting to see where that's going. Agricultural emissions make up 30% of the pie. So City of Watsonville, they are creating a cost and time efficient climate action plan. 2030 climate action plan and adaptation plan includes wetlands restoration grant, urban green planning, local hazard mitigation plans, and environmental justice. So their big points we're saying, leverage existing plans, departments, and staff, be bold and ambitious. And it's about people, not numbers, changing the culture, norms, and minds, and really engaging the community. Because if the community is not behind a CAP plan, it's not going to move forward. County of Santa Barbara has their One Climate Initiative. It's their flagship program, climate change vulnerability assessment and safety element update, wanting to understand climate impacts and their vulnerabilities. So they're doing the assessment currently still. It started in summer of last year, and then they're hoping to create their adaptation plan later this year and continue working on it through next year. So their goal is to reduce carbon emissions. Natural and working land GHG inventory is going to be happening, has been happening since November of last year, and is still being worked on now. And then they're also working on an active transportation plan, increasing safety and comfort for biking and walking to encourage people to get out of their cars. And then Gonzales, they've adopted a G3 initiative guiding principles, community-wide outreach. So focusing on environmental responsibility. They've done various climate action plans and updates to their sustainable community initiatives, ban on single-use plastics, no straw campaigns, school district recycling programs, solar-only ordinances, and they also offer recycling and sustainability services from the city's sustainability consultants to all businesses within Gonzales at no charge. They have their economic vitality to diversify and grow, partnered and incentivized businesses to do things such as wind turbines, recycling audits, and then social equity. Educated, provide context and relevancy for all city residents. They are the first city in the Tri-County area to adopt a health element to their general plan. So regarding climate action plans, they kind of laid out a roadmap for getting a climate action plan started. The key thing to start, GHG emissions, calculating those out. They did provide a number of California or a number of toolkits to go for doing climate action plan modeling and climate strategies. So coolcalifornia.org. They also have maps showing where there are jurisdictions that have adopted local caps. And interesting thing to note that of the 482 cities, 181 of those cities have caps, and of the 58 counties, 21 have caps, and this covers 64% of the population of California. So even though we don't have that in general, we are moving as a state towards actually implementing caps. So the steps to completing: complete a GHG inventory, conduct a business as usual forecast and adjust the business as usual forecast to account for statewide mandates, identify GHG emission reductions still required to meet those GHG targets, draft the GHG reduction measures, especially pointing out costs and funding, conducting public engagements to identify the needs of the community, and then finalizing the GHG reduction measures. And each measure includes specific implementation and monitoring requirements, create the draft and receive public comments. The plan will be qualified as a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions under CEQA, obtain a CEQA certification, and then hopefully adopt the cap. And then from then on, continue monitoring the strategies and adjust their approach, because what you were planning to do doesn't always work out. So funding, the biggest things are cities don't have funding, cities don't have staffing. The climate action plan acts as a baseline to get climate funding. You know, is there community priority for it? Is there political will? Department objectives, resourcing and prioritizing actions and projects. The CAP can help by snapshot of emissions by sector, giving the opportunity for stakeholders to engage in the process, prioritizes strategies to meet the goals of the cities, and then hopefully it will be adopted by elected officials and can become actually enforceable. Not everything can be funded with grants. Review of various capital improvement programs and processes to identify projects that are related to sustainability and could be adopted and aren't necessarily actually climate action, but do have climate impacts. Understanding the timing of budgets. So our budget discussions coming up with the city will be useful in knowing, you know, is there extra money somewhere that can be put towards maybe staff time to put this together, or maybe just relying on a more regional climate action plan to be done and having us focus on projects which the EC can actually implement, like what you're doing with the PIP4 and those type of projects. Build a fund. Are there revenue opportunities, leasing land for solar, generating power, carbon offsets, evaluating a CAPS implementation and funding sections. So this is the big, very interesting. I found this very useful. I haven't had a chance to go through and look at each of these, but these are each a website we can go to actually review existing climate action plans, climate change research. I've especially looked at resilientcalifornia.org and CalAdapt. Lots of good information, very amazing. Will be very useful in moving forward. And one of the biggest things, even if we can't develop a CAP, cities should still try to develop some type of climate action. It doesn't always have to be a CAP for it to be something that makes an impact on future climate change. And then as part of the breakout discussions, you know, we did discuss that many small cities don't have the resources and staffing, and how it would be extremely helpful to have a regional climate action plan to kind of cover the entire region, take the burden off of the individual cities. But this really requires elected leaders and upper management to be invested in helping to push and drive CAPS forward. It's a very technocratic and regulatory process. Having it done at a regional level might make it easier to deal with, and that allows city to focus on areas where they can really have an impact. Cities that do have individual CAPs, they noted that it's very important that we have similar tracking measures so we can actually compare the communities on the peninsula as time moves forward. So that regional collaboration, you aren't the only ones who want to do that. Lots of other cities are interested in getting together and having a more regional look at climate change rather than having it be each individual city. And then lessons learned on how to engage with the communities. COVID has really helped us learn how to engage with people without actually talking to people in person, and using that moving forward. And then if anyone is interested, I do have a link to the actual meeting, and I can feel free to share that. later, send out an email. And if you guys have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Dana. That was a great recap. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Chelsea.
I have 2 questions, Dana. Thank you for that great presentation. I learned a lot. I was wondering if, one, the county has or is planning to update their safety element of the general plan to incorporate climate adaptation policies. I know you mentioned that a couple of other nearby jurisdictions have already done that or are doing that, and I was just refreshing my memory on that. A related law, I think SB 379, that passed a few years ago, that basically requires local jurisdictions to update their safety element. I think by 2022. I'm sure there's other timelines and factors. So I know we were talking about climate action plans not necessarily including adaptation policies. Although it looks like, I guess, the Monterey County region is thinking about doing a more comprehensive sustainability program anyway. But it reminded all of these conversations remind me about SB 379. So getting adaptation policies or a plan in place through the safety element update in the general plan.
So I'm not sure if their local hazard mitigation plan is part of their safety element. So I do know that they're implementing climate change into their local hazard mitigation plan. And I just don't know if that's their safety element or not.
Yeah, it looks like from my quick read that if you have a local hazard management plan already, then your timeline, I guess, a local jurisdiction to update your safety element to include climate adaptation policies is by 2022. And I think if you didn't have something like that already, then the timeline was earlier. I'm correct in that. So yeah, I was just curious if that conversation came up in the summit.
No, not that I heard directly.
I didn't hear anything either. I participated in that summit as well. And the only clarification that I might add is, and I don't know how much Ashley went into this either at the summit or with us, but I know and Ashley's the sustainability coordinator for the county. I know she's been interested in proposing as part of the sustainability program, which I think is different than the plan. So they're not doing a climate action plan and a sustainability plan. I think what she's referencing is building an actual program with, to then help implement the climate action plan. That's my most recent understanding. And as part of her program, or even perhaps separate from the program, she's really interested in supporting a multi-jurisdictional staff member or team. And that might be a really good approach. So sort of picture a staff member or a team that would discuss things like regional adaptation plans so that Monterey doesn't do one thing that then messes up the coastline and seaside or marina. So that might be something that, it's not in place yet, but it's something that we can advocate and support because, the environment doesn't have the political boundaries that we have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And yeah, my apologies. This is probably a testament to not reading and talking at the same time. I was just looking at the requirements of 379, SB 379 again. So I think it's that if you already have a local hazard mitigation plan, then upon the next update of that plan, then you should incorporate adaptation policies. And if you don't have an existing local hazard mitigation plan, then you need to update that safety element to incorporate adaptation policies by 2022. So yeah, just wanted to correct myself on that. And I'm curious to hear more. It sounds like from different conversations we're having, we're all interested in exploring how we can best use different staff and volunteer time and commissioners and council time throughout the region to see if we can work together to create some kind of adaptation process and pool our resources. The second question I had is related on capacity. So I saw the Civic Spark link that you mentioned in your presentation, Dana. I can't remember if this came up already, but I was wondering if the city city staff are thinking about getting like added capacity through that program with support from an intern that could potentially work with the city on this topic.
I think Dominique might be better able to answer that question. I'm not sure regarding our internships.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, I saw in Dana's presentation slides this like Civic Spark program, which as I understand is kind of like a practicum or internship where students work with local governments to support them on climate related work, but don't know too much about that or the process. So I was just wondering if anyone on the staff side have talked about it and that could support capacity needs.
I have not heard any conversation in regards to the program, but also I'm only 3 weeks in, so there's probably a lot that I haven't heard. So, but I'll definitely take note of it, and we can, figure out where we need to go next or what we need to do, or what's the best way for us to be able to engage with the program and, what the next steps might be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. Any other comments or questions for Dana? I have a question that came up based on your presentation, Dana, and maybe you can help answer it, or maybe Beth can. What is the status of our general plan? Because if we're not done with that, is there still an opportunity to incorporate some of these elements? I mean, I know how difficult general plans can be to go through the approval process, but I feel like we did a lot of work as a community probably over a year ago now, but I haven't heard anything about
I'll take a try at that one first, Dana, and you can follow up with anything. We recently got approval from council for budget to be directed towards a specific consultant to finish up that work. We would expect soon to be looped into those conversations in terms of even making some more significant and substantial changes to what was done more than a year ago. So yeah, we'll try to push for inclusion on that and see what we can incorporate regarding what we just covered. Dana,
Okay.
anything you'd like to add?
Nope, that was my understanding as well.
Okay. And then my other question is related to the comment that you presented, Dana, about, we don't have to wait for a climate action plan, or we don't necessarily even need a climate action plan to start taking measurable actions to address greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And one of the things that has come up where I forwarded this to you, Beth, and we sort of talked about it. I think you asked around internally, but for the rest of the commission, just to bring you up to speed, the Monterey Bay, they changed their name, the Central Coast Community Energy, the 3CE, they have grants to help support staff to develop electrification ordinances. And I don't believe we have anything currently about electrification. I know it hasn't been incorporated in campus town development, but do you have any updates on that, Beth? And is that something that we would want to, if it hasn't been developed, that we would want to think about putting some resources and maybe pursuing that 3CE grant?
Yeah, when we first discussed it, I emailed the building official and did not hear anything back. I included the amount for the grant, which I think was $15,000, which you would think would more than cover a simple code update. I think it'd be a little bit more simple, even what we worked on for PIP4.
Mhm.
I resent that email probably in the last 2 weeks as well, and still didn't get anything. So maybe that's something I'll reach out and discuss with Jason Campbell and see how that can be pushed to the front of more awareness on the for members of the council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that was all I had. Any other questions? Like, I'll just open it up to the commission once more. If any questions or comments? Okay. I think we need to talk to the county again too. Talk to Ashley. Any comments from the public on this item?
There are no members of the public wishing to speak at this time.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to reports from commissioners. Any reports from commissioners? Chelsea, did you want to bring up the event now?
Yeah, I would love to. And Timothy, please feel free to supplement. So last year when we set out to create the work plan for the EC, we created a subcommittee. I think it's called the Green Economic Recovery Subcommittee, and I joined that committee. I'm very happy that Timothy's joined that committee or subcommittee recently. And so I mentioned, I think I discussed all I needed on the, I think I discussed all I needed on the poster for it to help small businesses access composting, recycling, and energy efficiency information. So that's, I think project number one under that subcommittee that's still underway. And then Timothy and I recently talked about a new idea on City of Seaside hosting essentially a farmer's market community fair idea. And as I understand from Beth, I think the city's attempted some sort of farmer's market in the past, and I don't know too much about it, so that could be something we could learn from. Of course, people probably know and have been to the City of Monterey's farmer's market that was happening every Tuesday evening. And I think it's been suspended because of COVID, but that one's definitely very long-standing. So for folks who haven't been there, it's our idea is very similar to what the City of Monterey is doing, where local produce vendors, food vendors, and arts or other small businesses can set up tiny shops essentially, and so that we can have a marketplace to promote those local and small businesses and art vendors. That would be the primary objective. And I think especially in the context of COVID, where a lot of small businesses have suffered and are struggling to make ends meet, and then with the hopes of coming back in person so we can all gather together again, hopefully post-COVID, sometime later in the year, we think that this is a good opportunity and a good time to explore this kind of seaside farmers market and community fair idea. So there's definitely more details that we're exploring and researching with Beth and Lacey, and there's a lot that needs to happen before it can materialize, but just wanted to share this idea to see if you have initial questions, initial feedback or response, and if you're excited or concerned about it, love to hear any feedback you have. And if you have any additional things you wanted to add, Timothy, please feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think you summed it up really perfectly. So like in terms of time and location, we were thinking of either making it bi-weekly or a monthly type of thing on Fridays. We were shooting to kind of start in August of this year, but again, we still have a lot of preliminary planning that we have to do. A few locations that we were thinking of was on Broadway Street between Terrence and Terrence and San Lucas Street. So either somewhere on Broadway where we would like close off the street, or just in the City Hall parking lot. That's something that Beth brought up. So we're still just kind of brainstorming something. Maybe the City Hall parking lot one could be in conjunction with Laguna Grande Park. And then I was just looking through the Marinas Farmers Market, and they're set up through Everyone's Harvest. And Everyone's Harvest is a 501c3 organization, and they have farmers markets in Pacific Grove and Marina. And they basically handle all of the vendors. So they have a application process that vendors go through, and they must be approved. And then they're basically on this roster. So that's something that we could look into. So basically they kind of handle all of the logistics. I sent an email to them just to kind of see what the process is and how they establish theirs in Marina and Pacific Grove. So far that's kind of all the research we've done.
Laura?
Hi. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that you've reached out to Everyone's Harvest. Everyone's Harvest was the administrator of the farmers market, which was attempted and ultimately failed in Seaside. And that was in 2019. Can't remember exactly when it started and ended, but that was on Saturday mornings on Broadway in the downtown section. And they will be able to give you a lot more information about how that went for them and what the challenges were, but it essentially was not very well attended. So I think that the idea of having it be less frequent than once a week is perhaps helpful, also given the changing circumstances in society and people being more attracted to outdoor gathering, potentially coming out of the pandemic, might be in our favor. And I think that including and encouraging other types of businesses, and specifically local businesses, which might have loyal followings and can rally their base essentially to come out and participate and get a certain critical mass of participation, will be very important elements to include. So very interesting.
Timothy and Mariana.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up with Everyone's Harvest. That was something that we were talking about, and I was considering when just looking them up and considering them, is that they have, their vendors, and that's kind of a limitation for them being not seaside centric. So we were looking to encourage more seaside businesses, and trying to do the outreach to our local businesses along with other non-ag vendors and other art vendors, to kind of promote all types of businesses within Seaside. That's something that we're looking into. It's just going to be a lot more planning. But yeah, thank you for providing that information about Everyone's Harvest. We'll look into that.
Mariana, then Laura.
Apologies, you might hear my little ones in the background here. What was I gonna say? We were in conversations with Everyone's Harvest at one point before they stopped doing the farmers market on Broadway. And one of the things that they look for is vendors that are providing healthier options when it comes to food, like vegetables and fresh vegetables and fruits. I just kind of want to give you a heads up on that. That was one of the things, because I brought up that idea of like seeing if some of our different small businesses, mom and pop shops, could be partake in that. And that was something that there was a little bit of hesitancy in.
I'll take my turn now. I just had thought this also could be a really nice opportunity to encourage active transportation, focused around an event like this, encouraging people to walk and bike, and really consider that in your potential siting of an event like this.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. I was just gonna add that I really like the idea of a community event, especially if the focus is on sort of welcoming people to the seaside economy, so to speak. You know, like let's promote our local businesses, let's support our local businesses. And as we're planning it on the back end, sort of subtly, this is how you do a sustainable event, right? Like this is how compostable items are used. As much as I would like to have an event on like focused on the environment or like farmers market, I don't know that we'd get the same audience, but I think really promoting it as like, you know, a community inclusive, everybody would be a really welcome sort of treat for our community. And I mean, live music, if we can get it. And I'm perfectly fine doing it once, right? Like, or maybe once a month for August, September, and October, which are like the really, you know, nice weather months around here. It takes a little bit of pressure off of like trying to maintain attendance for ongoing events. I also like the idea of incorporating sort of a tour somehow with it. I think this has been discussed before, like a culinary tour of the different food locations around. And, you know, maybe for people that choose to participate in it, we can provide them with the compostable ware, like to try out for this event or something, you know, so that sort of subtle environmental piece, or, you know, ride your bike from stop to stop or walk from stop to stop might be kind of a nice twist. And I know Sustainable Seaside, I think has, maybe it wasn't them, somebody has discussed doing some sort of a food tour for Seaside. So I like it. I think just projecting it in like a really inclusive community way, and also still being aware that we don't know what's going to happen with COVID entirely. So I wouldn't want to plan a whole bunch of stuff and then have a resurgence and have to shut it down. Timothy, then Kira.
Yeah, thank you for all this commentary. I think it's very valuable, and I do like the idea of, you know, maybe just having one or two or three of them to kind of be this like more sustainable return back to some type of normal, or just like promoting our local businesses. I just want to add the notion that I think it would be really good as well for the returning student population at CSUMB. To kind of introduce them to, you know, the culinary world of Seaside and, you know, other businesses within Seaside, because that's going to ultimately be a huge, you know, economic contributor to our businesses is the student population. So maybe trying to cater to that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Kira. You're muted again, my dear.
I'm just trolling you. Yeah, thank you. I'm just thinking back anecdotally on the Seaside events that I've attended and what I've seen. Tree lighting ceremony and the holiday celebration on City Hall lawn, like throngs of people, blues in the park, big crowds. I know there was a third one at the tip of my tongue. Oh, the fireworks up at Bayonet and Black Horse a few years ago. Massive amounts of people. And then Farmers Market 2019. Just feeling so, you know, so wanting to see that thriving, and it just wasn't. And I know that other people, I think Mariana and Lacey, or maybe it was Laura, were part of the conversations looking at, you know, whether it was the chicken or the egg, not enough vendors didn't bring enough people, or not enough people didn't bring enough vendors, whatever it was, it didn't work out. So I'm sorry if I missed some context around this, but I think launching a new and unfamiliar event might be biting off a little more than we can chew as a commission. But please correct me if I missed some of this, because I will totally admit that I had to turn off my camera and deal with my kids eating dinner. I just had to step away. So, but the people who are planning those really successful events, I don't know who they are or what magic they're doing, but what if we connected with them and offered to bring some funding and some energy to make those events super sustainable and add a little bit of programming to the events that might be happening this summer, to build on Lacey's idea that it's just something fun. It's not like come out to learn about climate change. You know, people aren't going to bring their kids out for that. Or I'm just thinking of the downer topics that can make environmental themed events kind of less exciting for families. And yeah, just make it like the most sustainable Blues in the Park we've ever seen. Make it a partnership, and then we could maybe have a booth or more programming or some vendors that have a special green, you know, Environmental Commission seal or something, and just build on what's already working.
The other event that I would add is that car show. Remember that car show that moved from like Monterey? That was Crazy Town.
Concours de Le Mans, like the feeder cars?
Yeah, whatever it was the craziest I've ever seen Seaside. And like every food vendor was sold out, and it was really fun. It was really cool.
And if I can add to that, having brought my kids there, the food vendors that we went to were giving us single-use styrofoam. And I was like, there's a city law against this. So yeah, it's like they knew how to throw the party, but they didn't have what we might bring as a commission. So it could be a really good, you know, collaboration to bring the two together.
Beth.
Yeah, an in-person event, of course, all the benefits everybody's already talked about. Just a couple ideas to share that just crossed my mind. When I was thinking about the people mentioned, we're talking families, we're talking college students, we're talking people who just live in Seaside. In addition to looking at an event, it would be kind of interesting to see what other collaborations we could do. And it could be based during a certain period of time, like a small business week, month, whatever it's currently classified as, where maybe we do create a map or a list of businesses in the city that are maybe even catered to certain age groups, demographics, kid-friendly, etc. Because if I'm new to CSUMB, let's say I'm a transfer student, I'm 21 years old plus, there's certain things I'm going to want to know about where I can potentially walk into a corner store and get the best sandwich in Seaside, as well as a good like craft beer potentially, or where the marijuana establishments are located and what's the best pairing for that in terms of bakeries in the town. So I think it could be really cool. I know that we did have kind of a list of restaurants in Seaside that has not been updated in years. It was like a 3-part pamphlet that you would, you know, open up, and it had some indicators that this was seafood or this was this type. But I think that could pair up too with when we go out and pass out some of these PIP4 related items, asking them at that time too if they're willing to be put on a list. And the encouragement that happens with those various demographics is if we're catering something towards a college student age, we could tell them like, post this on Instagram or whatever social media that restaurant currently does or doesn't use. Either way, like generate some interest beyond just a one-time thing or a one visit, and kind of try to promote it in that manner as well.
Plenty of feedback for you all. For you both.
Appreciate all of it. I'm just seriously taking notes. I really appreciate the different comments on a pilot that could be independent or building on an existing event that may be suspended now, but will hopefully come back soon. So I think if we piggyback it off of another event, we'll have to do some research on whether those are coming back. I probably hesitate to piggyback a farmer's market event off of a car show. But other popular things that make more sense together, I guess in my mind, I'm totally happy to explore. Potentially having a season-based market and community fair also sounds really great. Yeah, I also loved your comment, Laura, about promoting active transportation. So hopefully we can find a centrally located place that a lot of people can get to easily. I was thinking kind of outside of the box about giving people like $1, artificial dollar on if they bring their bikes or if they walk. But of course, like the issue of enforceability is kind of the question there. But I'd love to find a way to promote more like walking and biking to and from the event, assuming it's accessible to a lot of people. And Timothy and I were also thinking about like using this event, however it shapes up to be, as a way to kind of walk the talk of environmental protective practices, like using compostable ware. So I was thinking about reaching out to a couple of companies on whether they might be even interested in donating materials or partnering with us. So I think there's a lot of good ideas, and all of that, I think y'all mentioned like different partnerships that we can continue exploring. The Monterey, City of Monterey Farmers Market is interesting because it's actually hosted by the Business Association, the Old Monterey Business Association. So it sounds like it's a slightly different model than the Marina one. Yeah, and then Beth also mentioned that we could potentially partner up with the Neighborhood Improvement Program Commission. I think it's what it's called. So there's definitely a lot of partners, I think, out there. And I know someone mentioned Sustainable Seaside, so I'm happy to reach out to them as well.
Yeah, and just to add, I really like the comment that you made, Beth, about having some sort of pamphlet that would be catered to college students or maybe like residents of Seaside that says, where's the best place you can get a sandwich or a brew or something like that. So I think that's something that Chelsea and I can maybe look into either in conjunction with the event or separate to the event. So thank you for bringing that up too. I think that would be really a great resource that this subcommittee can provide.
Thank you both for your work on that. Any other commission updates or reports?
I'll just go ahead, Lacey. Habitat Subcommittee I have continued to engage with the community and other commissions, namely the Parks and Rec Commission, with which I liaise on that. And FOSPA, it has been hosting weekly for the past couple of weeks and continuing every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. until noon, park cleanups and pollinator habitat maintenance events. So I've been forwarding those to Beth, who has been forwarding those invitations to all commission members. Everyone is welcome. Please share them broadly with the rest of the community. We have had some pretty good attendance, and it's very encouraging to see, including commission members from Parks and Rec and also Councilmember Pacheco. And that will continue, and we will just be rotating. So we're moving around all of 7 parks, and then we'll start over again once we've met all of them. So pollinator habitat maintenance continues, and Sustainable Seaside Earth Day events. I hope Beth also will be sharing information about that. I've just forwarded. They will be having an Earth Day event the weekend after Earth Day, Broadway cleanup on Sunday, and then they're having a tomato sale in which they are also offering free pollinator plants for anyone who purchases tomatoes. Sustainable Seaside has discussed the possibility of a biking park tour instead of their sustainable living tour, potentially this fall, but everything depends on how things go with post-pandemic development. So nothing is yet slated. I will be attending the Parks and Rec meeting next Monday and have updates about what's happening there, but the tree planting will not take place until autumn of this year.
Thanks, Laura. I just want to add, I think the FOSPA work days on Saturdays have been really successful. I want to reiterate that. And the one this week is at Highland Otis Park. So if you all, oh, there's Laura. She turned her light on. If you all can, just mark these sort of on your calendar, and hopefully the message that Beth sent out or the messages sort of can be automatically entered onto your calendar. I think it's really great way to sort of just get out and connect with our community and, sort of show our service on this commission in a way that's different than these meetings where we have to sit inside of our rooms and stare at screens. So yeah, definitely encourage all of you to attend those if you can. Any other reports from commissioners? That represents both of our committees. The Plastics Policy Committee talked plenty earlier in the meeting. And reports from staff. Beth, do you have any reports for us?
I'll let Dominique introduce herself.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm still muted. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Davis, and I am the new city clerk with City of Seaside. I've been with the city before, back in 2013, to help out, and was most recently assisting our city attorney before I accepted the position as city clerk starting on the 22nd. So I'm very excited to be here, very excited to work with our boards and commissions, just supporting the mission and the vision that you all have, and for supporting the efforts that we have in making Seaside just the best that it can be. So please feel free to reach me. I'll be happy to assist you in any way I can. So hopefully you'll be seeing more of me, especially at these meetings as well. So.
Thank you so much, Dominique. We're so excited to have you. Welcome to this position, since you've been with the city in various ways throughout the years, and can already tell a difference. It's been really great having you join in on this meeting, and having this webinar format has been really helpful. Thank you so much for what you've done already, and we all look forward to working with you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Any other updates, Beth?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Before we adjourn, this is a little bit out of order, but at our next meeting, I'd like to propose that we discuss the schedule for our commission. So just wanted to give you a heads up to maybe think about that a little bit. We've been meeting quarterly, and I just want to discuss if we think that's been effective or not. So just think about that a little bit before our next meeting, because our next regularly scheduled meeting is TBD. When is it? 3 months from today? Which would be June, July?
I have no idea.
I know, I can't think off the top of my head. I'm so tired.
Yes, it would be July 13th.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Yeah, did you have a question, Chelsea?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Lacey, because it does seem like it might be helpful for us to meet one more time before the city adopts a budget at the end of June. So if we could meet in a month from now, I don't know if that would be a special meeting or if we reschedule for the rest of
It shouldn't.
starting with it might be helpful for us to at least close our budget requests work.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It shouldn't be a big deal to have a special meeting, but I'll double check with Dominique just to make sure she's not having to juggle too many things in one night.
Okay. That sounds good. So if we do have that special meeting, we can also talk about schedule for the commission going forward at that time. So stay tuned, I guess, for an email from Beth on when our next meeting will be. And until then, have a great evening. Thank you all so much for the work that you do to support the city and support each other and our environment. Really grateful for each and every one of you and the role that you play on this commission. Have a great evening. The meeting is adjourned. Go do great things.
Thanks, Lacey. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.